Okay, I think we're ready to get started here. Thank you everyone for joining us for the second installment of our Financial Health Equity series. My name is Maria Lachewski, and I'm a director on our innovation team at the Financial Health Network. When we were thinking about what topic to focus on for today, I know many of us have inflation on the mind, how higher prices, particularly gas prices, are pinching already tight budgets. But today, we're going to talk about another aspect of car ownership, auto insurance, for a few notable reasons. Next slide. For starters, auto insurance is legally required. You can't get on the road without it. It can be costly. The national average is about $1,600 per year, although we know that that can vary widely. And it's complicated to understand whether you're a native English speaker or not. But the main reason we wanted to talk about auto insurance today is because of the industry's alarming track record of discrimination. It's well known that insurance companies often use both driving and non-driving related factors when determining price and risk. These non-driving related factors can include your credit score, zip code, education level, whether you rent or own, and other socioeconomic data points. But when reporters looked at average premiums across comparable minority and non-minority neighborhoods, they found minority drivers were often paying higher, sometimes as much as 30% higher premiums than their non-minority counterparts, despite having excellent driving records. Fortunately, these are all problems that our industry can solve for. Next slide. In addition to growing legislation at the state level, there are also entrepreneurs like Sigo and Propel, both alumni of the Labs Accelerator program, who are working to change the status quo. I am delighted to be joined by Brian Gonzalez and Kezia Bergstrom today, who will share how they are using technology and user-centered design to expand fair access to financial products and create modern mobile-first experiences for their customers. Next slide. About our agenda, both Brian and Kez are going to spend some time talking about their respective companies before we come back together to discuss their partnership in more detail. After their presentation, we will transition to breakout rooms where you will be able to get your questions answered in real time and a chance to connect with your peers. Questions are also welcome throughout the presentation. Feel free to drop them in the chat box and we'll do our best to get to them. Finally, the session is being recorded. We'll share both the slides and a copy of the recording with everyone who registered. And with that, I will now pass the mic over to Brian to give us an overview of Sigo.
Hi, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you all today. Thank you, Maria, for having us and inviting us to be part of this conversation. As you mentioned, my name is Brian. I'm the VP of Marketing, and I've been with the company here at Sigo Seguros for over a year and a half now. I was brought in to help launch our proprietary product to the market. It launched in August of 2021. So we've been in the market for a little over a year now. And I must say, I continue to be as excited as I was when I joined now for the product that we've created here at Sigo. This company was founded by Latinx people for the Latinx community. And when we say we're a mission-driven company, we really are. Let's go to the next slide, please. Nestor, which is our CEO, tells this wonderful story about how, a while back he was helping his aunt she was looking for insurance, for auto insurance, but they could not find any insurance that was affordable, met her needs, and was able to support her in her own language. As he looked more into it, he found a couple of hard facts around how Spanish-speaking consumers are being taken advantage in the market. Some of those things are predatory fees, and some of those fees are cancellation fees, late payment fees, and a bunch of other fees that impact the cost of your insurance month over month There's even sometimes even a credit card fee for your payment and a lot more. There's also a lot of bias rating factors. The things that we call bias rating factors are some that were already mentioned: credit score, level of education, type of employment. If you didn't know, yes, these are things that are taken into consideration by most insurance companies to factor out the price of your insurance. Some other things were crappy distribution, especially for the Spanish-speaking consumer. Until now, they're expected to go to brick and mortars to speak with a broker that speaks their language, who then translates the policies for them and the rules and the contract, etc. And they charge them an expensive broker fee. And also, just to include that, and I think very much linked to the crappy distribution, is a bad customer service, right? Many major companies offer landing pages in Spanish. You can, search for any major auto insurance and you'll find a landing page in Spanish. However, once you go in to fill out a quote, the website is back to English, right? So it's not the best customer experience, which causes this particular sector of the population to be lumped into the non-standard bucket. Non-standard insurance bucket is generally known as a group of people with higher risk. We're talking about people with low credit scores, revoked licenses, versus the standard or preferred, who are bundling services like home and auto insurance. They generally want more coverage, right? Which is more expensive for their more expensive vehicles, or which are then considered more stable types of consumers, and that's why they want them, right? The truth is that this way of looking at Spanish speakers as a higher risk consumer is perhaps not the best way to look at them, right? Especially when we take into consideration that many of them perhaps may be undocumented and thus have no credit score or access to driver licenses. Some of those bias rating factors that we talked about also impact them in ways that perhaps other people are not impacted by them, right? And we know, and we can take a bet in saying that ultimately all of these things, all of these rating factors, do not speak to the ability of a person to be a safe driver. So we can go to the next slide. Because of this, with all of this in mind, we build a new kind of service where we not only save money for the consumer, but we also provide them with exceptional service in a language that they can understand. Here at Sigo Seguros, we do not charge any extra fees. So forget about a foreign license fee, a late payment, cancellation, or that credit card payment fee. What you are quoted for the monthly payment, that is what you should expect to pay every month. We accept all kinds of IDs. So whether it's a driver's license from another state, from another country, from a passport, we understand that our consumer a lot of times doesn't have the same access as some of these other types of consumers, right? And we have built a system to be completely online in both Spanish and English. Something that we keep hearing when we have conversations like this is, is the Spanish-speaking consumer actually like savvy enough to want to fill things online, or, to do everything online, especially when they're used to speaking with a broker? And here at Sigo, we find that over 70% of the folks who end up buying insurance with us have zero touch with an agent before buying. So they do everything 100% online. Our new way of providing services to this consumer not only helps us serve them better, but it helps us support a community, but it also allows us to use less data, right? We're not collecting credit score and all those things, which we can use that data to serve this population in a better way. Things like loss ratio, right? It informs our marketing, the services we provide, the types of discounts we can give to these folks. And this creates a loop in which we are continually helping this community while they continue to support our services. Now, I just told you, about our consumer and how we built this product, but the big question is it working? If we can go to the next slide. I'm here to tell you that we truly have built the first digital insurance platform for one of the largest Spanish-speaking countries in the world. which is the US. In the year since we launched, we continue to see growth month over month. For a startup that started about a year ago, last month, we sold over 1,000 policies in Texas alone. Our cost of acquisition continues to also decrease month over month. And like I mentioned, over 70% of our customers are doing it all online. If we can go to the next slide. Here are some of the reviews that we keep getting. I realize that some of these are in Spanish, but trust me when I say that they're all talking really good things about us, about how much money they're saving, how easy the sign-up process has been, and how great our customer service continues to be. So yeah, that's a little bit about Sigo.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah, go for it. Sorry.
We're really excited to bring Sigo into the Accelerator program for many of the principles, Brian, that you touched on, building a mobile-first product, thinking about price transparency, and really designing this product with your end user in mind. It is rare to find a product that is available in another language, but from end to end. So your customer support team, looking at your terms and conditions. If you are a true native Spanish speaker, like you can access everything that you need to through the Sigo platform. And that's just not true for many other fintech products. And I know that many of those principles Propel also considers when they're building financial products and tools. And so Kez, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Propel and the Providers app?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So I'm Kez and I work at Propel. And really excited to go over a little bit about our company, what we do, and how we also partner with other companies like Sigo. If you can move to the next slide, please. So for a very high level, how to situate Propel as a company, and how we think about ourselves is we're very much building technology, modern, respectful, effective for low-income Americans for their overall financial health. And this company started about 8 years ago, and the way that was really characterized was with two things in mind. And the first being that to connect with Americans, it very much needs to be mobile, especially with low-income Americans who are often very busy, are on the go all the time. That is very much a mobile experience. And then the second part of that is that low-income Americans, their overall financial well-being, overall financial health is oftentimes a accumulation of a couple of different components, one of which being government benefits. So as with all of those in mind, how this kind of came to take shape, if you could go to the next slide, please, is very much through the development of the Providers app. And so the Providers app is our platform we use to engage with our users. And through this platform, you can sync your different government benefits. And so what you're seeing on the left here is going to be what this looks like in app. So when you log on, you can sync your disability benefits, your EBT benefits, WIC benefits, whatever is applicable to you. And you can see that in one overall picture to kind of get a sense of your overall financial health, that well-being. But as we continue to build out the app, the other things we were looking at were very much what is encompassed by financial health. What are the things that our users are looking for, seeking? And a big part of that is very much broken down into ways to earn money and ways to save money. Next slide, please. And when we are doing, going through our partnerships and we're trying to figure out where are these needs, one of the biggest things that we do, we're really proud about, is we do monthly interviews with our users. And through these interviews, that's where we kind of understand what the economic situation is like across the country, what it is like for individuals, and what their needs are. And one of the main things that really came about from us was that most of our users are either unbanked or underbanked. And so then that led to the rollout we had last year of our actual debit card product. And so now in our app, you can also sync that as well. So it's very holistic. And that's one of the biggest things for us, is just making sure that we are meeting user needs. We're meeting users where they are, both literally in the mobile sense, but also the needs that they have going on. And we see that come about in a lot of different ways. And so if you could go to the next slide. It's interesting for us because when we look at our demographics, we definitely do have a very kind of key demographic, but of course there's diversity within it. And so right now where we're at today is we do have over 6 million monthly active users across the US and the territories. And when we look at engagement on our platform, because we are very much operating in that like neo-banking sphere where users are logging in to check their remaining balances on their Snap card or to check their bank account balance on our debit card, we're seeing our users are roughly engaging almost every other day. So it's very much a high frequency touch point to engage with a low income community nationally. And then when we kind of break that down, overwhelmingly, our users are women and they're women with children. As it currently stands with total households, we're working with about 25% of all SNAP households, SNAP recipients nationwide. And then we also have a pretty representative like spread across where we are like urban versus rural. And so you can see that here about 60% is concentrated in our more urban areas. The other thing that made this partnership so beneficial for us is our app is fully available in Spanish. And so right now about 4% of our users are using the app in Spanish. So we're just under a little less than 250,000. But that was also one of the biggest things for us is making sure that the resources that we're sharing in our app are fully translated and making sure that if we are supposed to be this app that is connecting with people, it is an opportunity to share resources, information, an opportunity for an individual to just come on and be able to check in with the opportunities around them, opportunities to save, opportunities to earn. They should be able to access that in any way possible, including language. Next slide, please. And so when we look at how we actually partner with different companies, the biggest way we think about this is very much like helping our users make it through the month, any month. And this is largely done in like saving money or earning money. And so these are just some examples of the kinds of partnerships we've worked with in the past. And so some of them are very much rooted in those daily savings, which is going to come in the form of like your grocery shopping benefits. A lot of this too, since our users are SNAP recipients, we do overlap very well with a lot of the different government subsidies or programs that require low income verification to participate through like the Lifeline program or some of these internet programs that we see. So that's another very obvious fit for us. But then beyond that, we also get into like the expenses that you really can't avoid. And one of which is very much car insurance. And because we know our users are always on the go, transportation is a very obvious part of their life. And so that's one of those where it's like, these are the kinds of partnerships that we strive to put on our platform as well, because if we have the ability to put cost saving offers in front of our users, that's what we want to make sure we're connecting them with. Next slide. And so the way we kind of think about our app holistically is very much an ecosystem. And so when you log on the app, the first home screen you see, it's very much just that overview of all of your different accounts that are synced. A lot of our users, they come for the functionality, but they stay for everything else. And that's one of the biggest things we've really leaned into as we've been thoughtful in building out the product, building out the app, and building out our partnerships. And we do have some examples of our partnerships here, but one of the biggest things is very much like the scalability. And it's also like the cost effectiveness. Depending on the business model of a partner, if the target audience is a low income audience specifically, historically, that's one of the most difficult demographics to reach through like traditional marketing channels. And so one of the things that is like a huge differentiator for us is that our entire audience is in of itself that kind of affinity audience, whether it be low income or also just individuals that are cost conscious and care about budgeting and they care about getting the best deal. And that kind of concludes, I think, high level of a bit about like Propel and about the Providers app specifically.
Thank you so much, Kaz. You had mentioned monthly interviews with users, and I just want to let our audience know that Propel does a fantastic job of sharing out some of those insights and learnings. If you go to their website, you can see regular routine reports about what they're hearing from the customers that they're serving. But it's just always so impressive because to kind of just hear and be reminded of the scale that Propel has in reaching your target audience. That's a great segue if we go to the next slide, where we're going to drill down a little bit further into the partnership between both of these organizations. I know that Propel is very intentional about what types of advertisers and partners they bring onto their marketplace, and have just a very thorough vetting process for evaluating who they would like to partner with, and who would be most relevant, given the pain points of their users. So Kez, like, tell us, I understand that, pilots are a part of this evaluation process when you're looking to bring new partners onto the platform. So maybe just walk us through some of the things that you were aiming to test and learn during your pilot with Sigo in particular.
Yeah, and when we're starting with any new partner, part of our vetting process is really understanding their business model, understanding like what their objective is with engaging in our audience. And so like the biggest thing for us is really like mission alignment. And that's one of the things we really saw in Sigo is the intentionality behind the company that they have, who they serve, and why they serve. And so the biggest thing for us, actually, if you can skip to the next page, we were really trying to understand from a pilot, like how do we actually connect Sigo with the target audience? And so our app is available in both Spanish and English, but there is still a very disproportionate amount of English speakers, or at least not necessarily English speakers, but people who use the app in English. And so that was one of the things when we're like planning this partnership, is trying to understand how are we going to target and like what are our key objectives. And so when we were working with Sigo, one of the biggest things was like recognizing that if we launch this campaign the way we would traditionally launch it, a lot of like the budget and the reach is probably going to be pulled towards that English audience, which is exactly what we did not want to happen. So we really had to kind of work around framing the pilot in a way from a timeline that also made sense to align with our goals. The other difficulty is we rarely are privileged enough to work with a partner like Sigo that's such a perfect fit for us as far as like the mission. And so what that also meant though is like our projections for like what we thought would perform was very difficult for us to know when we were getting started. And it's because we didn't have any partners that really had like a Spanish beyond the landing page, the Spanish experience, and was mobile first. Those are the biggest things for us, making sure it's mobile first and making sure what our users are exposed to from like an ad is the experience that they're going to get. And so this was a little difficult where we were like, okay, we are going into this a little blind because we're not quite sure how this is going to perform. And so what we really did there is we actually just siloed it. And so we did kind of a tiered rollout in this pilot where we initially launched exclusively on the Spanish side. And that way we could get a sense of like, what was the engagement, what was that demand, and then understand how much more room we had for testing than on the English side. I can take a break there if you also want to jump in, Brian.
No, you're doing a great job. I think it all sounds great and true.
And actually, Maria, if you want to go to the next slide.
And because I was on mute, but I did have a question, if you don't mind, going to the previous slide. You just mentioned there that you were concerned that just running one single pilot would pull the budget that you had available to the English speakers before reaching all of the eligible Spanish speakers. Why was that important to Propel?
Yeah, it was, well, one, it was important to us because it was important to Sigo. But the other reason why is like just who we are as a company ourselves, like our mission is very much about reaching what is holistically an underserved audience. So when we're working with a partner and they are another segment of that and very much, the Spanish speaking population, which as Brian outlined is very much taken advantage of, it was really important that we made sure we were intentional as far as prioritizing these users.
Great. Thank you for clarifying.
And if you can go to the next slide. So this was the other thing. So when we first started working together, we were also really just starting to kind of roll out our different like ad products, our capabilities, like the marketing partnership. And so it was very much, we have 4 ads, all of our 4 ad templates, because everything is built very natively in app, and it's supposed to come across as this very seamless experience. So we do have some like best practices we recommend, and one of which you see here is very much like digital illustrations. But because this was new territory, you know, some of those best practices, we were like, we don't know if it's what's going to happen here. So our kind of recommendation was, let's just run with like all 4, and let's like see what kind of engagement we're getting as far as like what are users clicking on the most, like what is the most attention grabbing, what is actually driving that traffic. And so from there, we were able to, after a couple of weeks, I think on our Spanish platform, but usually after like a first month or whatever, that's when we can go ahead and then start optimizing. When we're usually starting with like 4 ads like this, that optimization can be as simple as just pausing those other ads. And sometimes it means if the messaging isn't working well, in this case, messaging was working well, so it wasn't a concern. Sometimes it's coming back to the drawing board and completely rewriting that, or perhaps it's an issue with the digital illustration. It's not connecting with users in the way we thought. I think we were very fortunate because Sigo actually very much like listens and responds and does very well as far as those best practices, and as far as like working with us is making sure it was like mutually agreed upon process. And yeah, so this is actually what you're seeing here. This was the Spanish testing that we did on our Spanish platform. And so as of last month, where we're at from like a click-through rate, which is like one of the kind of standardized metrics of like how many users are actually clicking through, so who's expressing this interest. I think as of last month, we were above a 1%, which is a very high standard for us to have. The other thing that's worth noting too is unlike your daily expenses, like your groceries, when you get into policies, oftentimes, you know, a lot of users, they'll have a policy and then they'll stick with it for a while, not until it's time for them to really reconsider. So the fact that we were seeing like a 1% click-through rate and we're still seeing that is very indicative from our perspective that like the value is very much there. The value that like Sigo is offering our users, the interest is there because we're consistently seeing our users engage, even though most likely they already are covered by a current policy already. So that's one of the biggest things too, is making sure our users have access to like choice as they're making their financial decisions. And our next slide is then also an example of the English testing we went through. And so this was, as you can see here, there was a difference on our Spanish side. That kind of like vertical image format was the top performer. Here, it was the horizontal. One of the things we did on the English side when it was time for us to test is you can see like in that kind of that first upper right, we wanted to emphasize Spanish speaking in the ad copy, because we also wanted to still focus then on like multilingual community and like emphasize Spanish speaking was like the key concept behind like Sigo coming to creation, what the actual value of the service is for the user base. And that was one we also tested some things like Texans, really calling out like the state, calling out the location, tying it into the most personal experience possible. What actually ended up here is it didn't seem like it made that significant of a difference. And so what ultimately happened on the English side is we did actually end up moving forward with this like more horizontal, which is that more simplified version. But what we then did is then we made sure we siloed out the budget behind everything. So made sure that we allocated heavier to the Spanish side than the English side as our way to really just bring it all together. And those are our visuals. I don't know, Brian, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think so far so good. I don't know if you have any other questions, Maria.
Yeah, I find it fascinating that the text and the graphic that did the best from a click-through rate perspective was different from the Spanish to the English version. I don't think that I would have expected that if you had asked me without seeing the actual data here. And I think the point that you made, Kaz, is really good for other providers to be aware of when you are measuring marketing campaigns like these, that you can't necessarily compare apples to apples. So when you're marketing an insurance product versus grocery coupons, you might see a much, much higher engagement rate with something that users can take advantage of today versus, like you said, something like an insurance policy, which is just inherently more stickier and it's harder for users to switch providers. And there's actually a question about that in the chat for Brian. The question was, what factors does Sigo use to price policies, but also to the stickiness factor? Do you require people to pay the full 6 months in one payment, or do you allow monthly equal payments at no extra charge? Could you answer that?
Yeah, great question. Before I answer the question, I'll say, like, as a person, as a company looking for a partner, I think it's been important to know that the partner is willing to test and look at and understands their client well enough to also be a good advisor to us on best practices, which I think Propel has done a wonderful job of doing, especially when it comes to, for a lot of these companies, we're one of the first companies to provide services in Spanish, right? Like, regardless of whatever other services they have. So a lot of times we're going into testing. So it's important that we're all kind of in agreement about what the test looks like, what the demographics look like, et cetera, which kudos to Propel for always being on top of that. As for the factors for pricing, car insurance, if you're not familiar with it, is highly regulated state by state. There are already factors within the law, within auto insurance, that you have to take into consideration no matter what, which kind of dictate how you're able to price auto insurance. So we look at those. And then on top of that, the other things that we do pay attention to is if you have a driving record, we're looking at that driving record, the amount of claims that you might have put out. Unfortunately, zip code also continues to be part of the regulations on how you need to price. So that also comes into consideration. And as for the payments, our policies are 6 months. And the initial quote that you get is a monthly quote. So it's a monthly payment for 6 months. If you want to make a full payment for the whole 6 months, there is an extra discount for that. So not an extra charge for the monthly equal payment, it's more like a discount if you pay a full lump.
Great, thanks for clarifying that, Brian. You had mentioned there that when you're looking for partners, kind of a culture of measurement and testing is something that you look for. What else were you hoping to get out of this partnership with Propel? Did you have, from a marketing perspective even, did you have specific metrics you were trying to hit? How do you think about success from these types of partnerships from Sigo's perspective?
I think for us, we've been always very intentional about having responsible growth over like growth that just comes out of nowhere and we don't really understand where it's coming from. So for us, it's really important that whatever partnership we're getting into aligns well with the values of our company and is actually targeting the types of consumers that we're trying to target. As you saw here, it's not that we're only serving the Spanish population. We understand that I saw there was a question about Haitian Creole. While we don't necessarily right now offer other languages, that our product is not only helpful to this one minority group, it's really helpful to all types of minority groups, right? And hopefully as the company grows and we're able to expand our services not only to other states, but also other languages. So when I'm looking for a partner, is definitely looking for that alignment in values, in the types of people that they're reaching out to. We could partner with some other company that's going to bring a lot of customers, but they're not necessarily the type of customer that we want. And I think that's very important in the decision-making process. I'll also add the Propel was our first, one of our first, I think it came in with 2 or 3 other ones, partnerships that we were starting when we first launched. So, especially for a young startup, it was an exploration of a particular channel, another channel that we could potentially use to get customers. So that testing phase was important because we were also testing whether a partnership or the partnership route would be a good way to get customers. So I think this just the stars aligned in this case because it was a really great partnership.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. There's another question in the chat that I think would be relevant for both of you, by Juliana. Do you ask on the app whether the person is filling out the information for themselves or on behalf of somebody else? Many Spanish-speaking families will have their younger bilingual or mostly English, and some Spanish-speaking relatives help with applications, and it might be helpful to understand who is managing the information and for whom. Would love to hear your reflections on that. I think that both of you have been thinking about not just the user, but if they have a caregiver or some other relative who's helping them with their financial lives.
Yeah, for on the Propel end, that's huge for us. And so we do have directional data as far as because of our monthly surveys. And then we do also have like a biannual, much larger survey we ask our users and we aggregate that information. I want to say we were just going through like caregiver status who self-identifies as a caregiver. I want to say that was somewhere between like 13 to 20%. So actually a pretty decent amount of our users that self-report. However, what's interesting about Propel is we do, because of the way the low income population in America has historically been kind of targeted in like predatory measures, we are very intentional and not really saving a lot of user data. So we don't actually have like any individualized user profiles at this point in time. So that's why we aggregate our data. And that's why we don't have, we have discussed like, should we have more of like kind of an onboarding so we can have that profile so we can serve more relevant offers, still to be determined. But that's a really good question. And that's the exact thing we spoke about with Sigo, why we would be running the ad on the English platform at all. And it was very much because of like that caregiving aspect, or because whoever this policy is for, maybe they're not using the app in Spanish, but they would still benefit from a Spanish speaking company.
I think that's one of the reasons why we don't hesitate in working with partners who serve mostly in English or whose population is bigger in English speakers than Spanish, because we understand that. Like we understand, personally, I've had to translate for my family in a lot of times. So we know that there is a potential that somebody's going to view that ad in English, but know that the service is available in Spanish, and they're going to tell, their family member, somebody else. So that's something we definitely keep in mind. In insurance, so regulation wise, if you're buying your insurance, you have to be the one that does the signature. You have to be the one that verifies that information, right? So legally, we're able to do that all online, and we trust that the consumer is the one that's kind of filling out, their ID information, signing the contract, etc. If they do call and they want more information from the conversation, from the policy, then there are required questions that they need to answer in order to prove that they are, or get approval from the main person to be the spokesperson for the policy. Yeah.
That's helpful. We'll take one more question from the chat here. And for all other questions, we'll try to either get to them in the chat or we'll take them to the breakout rooms. But Brian, this question builds on that conversation. So being an insurance provider that is entirely mobile, what is your experience in dealing with the kinds of services that require a more personal and individual approach? Claims, quoting, total loss, etc. Where does kind of the human touch come into the Sigo experience? If you could speak to that.
Yeah. So, because it is a digital experience, in part of our, drip campaigns, if you will, the marketing part, we make sure that there is a human touch to those. While our CEO is not writing emails back and forth, we make sure that our marketing material has that voice of the CEO and or other employees, and that people can feel that we really have their back. We also are really good about answering email questions or phone if you need to, and we always give that information, right? You need to call us, you need to contact us, here is the information, please do so, because we want to make sure that that there is a human behind all of this. And I think that is a challenge that comes with the century in which we're living in, right? The digital world, and trusting and giving that trust to the consumer that there are humans behind this. Obviously, when it comes to more of those touchy subjects like claims or total loss, et cetera, there is a different approach. So for some of those right now, you can submit a claim that online. You still have to get on the phone with somebody who's going to go through that process with you, right? There's questions that need to be answered. There's documentation that needs to be received. So you can either call us to give that, or somebody from our team will definitely be reaching out to you in order to get that information. So I'll just summarize in saying that we make sure that you have access to one of our representatives at any moment that you might need it.
Thanks for clarifying, Brian. Before we transition to the breakout rooms, I'd love to hear, Kez and Brian, what else should our audience know? What's on the roadmap? What other kinds of partnerships are you looking for? Any departing words before we head to the breakout rooms?
Yeah, I think the big thing for Propel is, as we're continuing to reach more Americans and continuing to grow, we're also trying to figure out what that means for our partnerships as well. And so, redefining, we've had our traditional partners we usually work with, but in this day and age, we do see so many disruptors and innovators. And so we are always interested in learning more about what's out there and who is really mission aligned with us, and how we can work with them to promote those services to our users.
Wonderful. And how should folks get in touch with you, Kez, on that point?
We have partnerships at joinpropel.com. That's probably going to be the fastest way. It routes straight to me. So I'll also be right on that email.
Wonderful. And how about you, Brian? What's top of mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, we're in the process of planning for 2023, right? And we want to continue our growth. And I think partnerships is definitely a channel that we want to continue to expand. So if you are any type of provider or organization that works with our particular consumer, right? And I'm not even just talking about apps. You could be a nonprofit organization, a community organization, any of the above. We want to have a conversation with you. We want to learn more about your folks, and hopefully come into some sort of agreement in which we can help out your consumer. Like I said, we are mission driven, so we are interested in reaching this kind of population. So please do reach out. Easiest way, probably info@sigoseguros.com, and it will also make my way to my inbox, and we're happy to help.
Wonderful. Thank you to both of you. Before we move into the breakout rooms, I just wanted to share a couple of FSL updates for our audience here. Next slide, thanks. First, we recently announced our latest exchange cohort of fintech and nonprofit partnerships who are working to improve benefits-related pain points in financial coaching, housing, and childcare. And you can learn more about these grantees by visiting our Financial Solutions Lab website. Next slide. We also have the third webinar in our financial health equity series coming up that will feature a company by the name of Stackwell, and they are working to address the social, emotional, and cultural barriers that keep Black communities from becoming investors. I actually met with the founder yesterday, and I think it's going to be a really illuminating conversation. Next slide. Here are the instructions for joining the breakout rooms. You'll actually receive, you should receive a pop-up, and you can select either to join Sigo's breakout room or Propel's. If you don't see the pop-up, you can go right down to the toolbar. You'll see the breakout rooms icon, and you can join a room from there. We will not be coming back to the main room once the breakout rooms have ended. And so I just want to take the opportunity to thank our speakers, Brian and Kez, for your time today. I'd like to thank my marketing colleagues, Michael, Julie, and Aaron, and thank all of you for joining us on this Thursday. I hope it was an informative conversation, and we'll see you in the breakout rooms.